Hi everybody, welcome to Inside Practice. Today I'm joined by Sam Jardine, partner at Fieldfisher and a key speaker at London Wellbeing on the 10th of September. Welcome.
Oh, thank you very much.
So I know I've given a bit of a short intro there, Sam, but would you mind telling our audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So my name's Sam. I'm a partner at Fieldfisher. So my specialism is technology and commercial contracts. I've been doing this for about 25 years. And as an aside from the day job of being a partner and doing contracts, I also work on a pro bono basis with Law Care, which is a charity that supports mental health and well-being within the legal profession.
Excellent. So let's dive straight into a couple of questions that I have for you then. So I know the pandemic seems worlds away now, but we're still emerging from it in a certain sense, and we're still transitioning back into working in the office. I want to ask, what do you think law firms should be doing differently to support mental health and well-being?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question, and I think COVID was a pretty turbulent time for many of us, and for some people it represented a bit of a kind of existential threat. And I think for many it would have been highly formative. And we don't know yet, I suppose, the full effects of COVID or the full impacts, but perhaps one positive outcome in the legal profession is that it has accelerated, if you like, the conversation on mental health and well-being in law, which I think had only really started a few years beforehand. So it helped remove a bit of the stigma and the shame that previously had been associated with the effects of stress. So that sort of stiff upper lip mentality has kind of thankfully gone out of fashion a bit more now. I think law firms are now much better at recognising that part of retaining good talent within law firms means catering for a range of workplace needs. And staff, I think, really more than ever want to feel valued and that their contribution is recognised. I think one of the biggest challenges we have as we move from COVID back into the office and thinking about the future is kind of how we keep that torch burning, if you like, for the next generation. Like, how are we providing for them in needs in terms of training and development needs? You know, when you work closely with juniors and you see them growing and challenging themselves and improving, it's really satisfying from a professional perspective. You feel like you're making like a big difference. But I think to your question, the biggest boost, if you like, to mental health and well-being isn't the noise that firms make around mental health. It's not a gimmick or a flash in the pan that you can kind of solve with a ping pong table or a few baskets of fruit. It's actually a longer term cultural commitment to staff well-being and about balancing the rights and responsibilities that we all have and being generous with our time and our attitudes. You know, are we investing in people? Are we giving them interesting work and helping them develop whilst at the same time being mindful of their other commitments? So I think in summary, it probably has more to do with behaviours than kind of office attendance. It sort of transcends, if you like, that office attendance piece that people talk about when they associate things with COVID.
Yeah, definitely. And going back to what you mentioned just now, is there's now multiple generations of lawyers in today's firms, all with different expectations and behaviours. How can firm leaders create a culture of wellbeing that works for everyone, despite those expectations being different around work-life balance?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's an interesting conundrum as well. And when I was thinking about this, I thought about what Darwin had said. I think he said the most successful species were those who succeeded in adapting themselves best to their environment. And as a child, I used to read Aesop's fables, which I don't know if it's still popular, but one of them tells the story of a mighty and a proud oak tree and some small reeds that were nearby. And when a big hurricane blew, the oak tree stood proudly and resisted the storm, but it was eventually knocked over. Whereas the reeds were bent low by the storm, but they didn't break, and they stood upright again once the storm had passed. And I take this to mean that flexibility and adaptability are important strengths. And why is this important? Because we've had a bit of a generational clash, if you like. And if we blindly sort of insist that our way is the right way, or we've always done it this way, then we might end up with problems, a bit like the oak tree. One of my favourite poets put it like this. In the original language it reads, Min hamakom shebo anu tzodkin lo yitzmechu leolam prachim ba'aviv, which means from the place where we are right, where we think we're right, no flowers will ever grow in the springtime. And I quite like that idea. And it talks to me about us accepting, if you like, that other people may have different motivations or circumstances than we do, and we should be prepared to listen to that and adapt. As an example to your question, I've seen this done very well in some teams where folk, for example, need flexibility around childcare. Some of the best leaders say, no problem, if you can make the job work around your needs, that's great. And I work with colleagues who do this. They're super conscientious, diligent, they're organised, and actually, more often than not, they're pretty loyal. And we'd probably lose folk like this if we demanded office attendance all day, every day, because it just wouldn't work for them. So for them and for others, well-being is really about providing excellent opportunities for people whilst being mindful of what that person needs in order to flourish. And that, for me, might be different to another person. And it's probably a kind of long-winded way of saying that law firms are not, or perhaps they're no longer, military organisations, if you like, where command and control and unquestioning obedience is required. No, we hire people because they're bright and they can provide excellent advice to clients, and that's how our business ultimately succeeds. So I think when people feel heard, their levels of well-being increase. This job is pretty demanding. There's no secret about that, but it's very intellectually satisfying and rewarding, and we have to set people up for success.
Absolutely. And from your own experience, could you perhaps share an example of how prioritising mental health and well-being has had a positive impact?
Yeah, I wonder if I could possibly take you on a little journey by way of responding to this question. My generation grew up with very high expectations placed on us from schools, homes, etc. I think many of us were, perhaps and still are, some of us have moved on a little bit, what Professor Laura Empson calls insecure overachievers. We want to do well, but there's a risk that we allow ourselves to be defined by what we do instead of who we are. And I think if we define ourselves by our achievements, I'm this or I've done that, or this is how much I've got, etc., there's a risk that we prioritise these things above other things which are more important, such as our own well-being, our families, our friends, our time. In my view, kind of working hard is important, whatever job we decide to do, but it should be enjoyable, so we're going to spend the best part of our life doing it, quite frankly. But that said, all work is only part of our lives, and we do well to ensure that the other parts are given the proper due care and attention. And this came home to me some years ago. We had a family bereavement that it made me sit up and question several things, including my own attitude and relationship with work. And I suddenly realised that life is a very precious gift, but it's also finite. And no one at your funeral is going to talk about how much money you made for you or your company. They're going to talk about how you made them feel, and the kind things that you did, or the jokes you made, or how you helped them, or the wisdom you imparted. They may even talk about your questionable, in my case, fashion sense, and so on. So I kind of made a conscious decision at that point, I suppose, to reframe my relationship with work. I decided that I wanted to make my job work around my life. And if I ever stop loving my job, I'll probably go and do something else. And I guess that shift in my own mind has allowed me to enjoy a much healthier relationship with work. I generally only work with clients who I like and who share a similar ethos to me, and I'm not interested in working in a hugely stressful environment. That said, it can be stressful from time to time, but I think that's the same in any job. I think life's taught me that we can't control everything, and we can't please everyone all the time, but we can control how we react to circumstances and perhaps how we frame things. So I guess since this was brought home to me, I'm much happier and healthier in general. I still worry and stress. I'm still very driven, but my inner peace and my health and my relationships are more important to me than the traditional hallmarks of success. And those things come and they go, a bit like the mist in the background picture I've got on my screen.
Definitely. And obviously all of this collates to the fact that you're a key speaker at our Wellbeing event in September. I'd love to know, what are you personally most excited to discuss at the upcoming event, and what do you hope attendees can get out of the conversation?
Yeah, I think you've got a really good lineup and lots of really fascinating people. And what I love most about these things is hearing the opinions of the other speakers, including some fellow partners at different firms, particularly on how they approach work and well-being. And I'm really keen to obviously hear the experiences of the audience as well. And I predict there's going to be some really fascinating insights, perhaps some healthy disagreement on some approaches. But the key thing, I think, is that there's a lot to learn here. And I plan to take away 3 learnings, which I can incorporate into my own practice. I can't tell you what they are yet because I haven't heard them, but we'll see.
Fabulous. And to wrap up this interview then, I would love to finish with the question, why do you do the work you do for mental health and well-being?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and again, it's been a bit of a journey for me. So I guess over the last 25 years or so, I've found law a highly stimulating and rewarding career. There's always something new to learn every day. There's never a dull moment. But it can also be a very stressful career at times. Demands that are placed on us by others, but also demands we place on ourselves. I've come to realise that in the legal profession we aren't the best at looking after ourselves. And there are many reasons for this, which I expect we'll explore more in the conference. But I do the work I do because I want people to be aware of the choices they have, and I see this as a responsibility on my part. I've had some great teachers, and I want to pass on some of those positive messages to the next generation. We can't solve this all in one go, but I think change will happen little by little if we keep the issue alive. And as one sage put it, it's not for us to complete the task, but neither are we free to stand aside from it. So hopefully the ripples many of us are making now will turn into waves, and our profession will be better able to look after ourselves and others, whilst continuing to enjoy this fantastic career that we have.